Hi, this is a Skeptical Consult with Dr. Stephen Novella. On this episode, I'm going to talk about the notion of, hey, why not try something? It couldn't hurt. Actually, I think that logic is fundamentally flawed. So I want to really deconstruct this notion that there's no reason not to try something if there doesn't appear to be any immediate harm. So first of all, there are lots of different kinds of harm, and we really need to evaluate this in what physicians will say is a risk versus benefit analysis. Anything that does anything, if it's doing something to the body, if in other words, there's any potential for something to help, then it can hurt. So in essence, there's no such thing as something that can help but can't hurt. Now, the probability of harm may be absolutely minimal, but that's why we do a risk versus benefit analysis. What is all the potential risks of doing the intervention, taking a product or doing a procedure or engaging in some kind of physical activity, versus what is the potential benefit? And then it's just statistically, are you more likely to be harmed or helped by doing that intervention? Sometimes we apply that to population, to the whole population for public health considerations, like, how many people do you have to treat in order to help, and how many people will be harmed by side effects for everyone who is helped. That's the kind of analysis that really matters. There's no such thing as an intervention that has zero risk. Even things that we consider to be home run, awesome treatments like vaccines, for example, they're not zero risk. Nothing is zero risk. That does not exist in the healthcare medical world. In addition to a risk versus benefit analysis, you also need to do a cost effectiveness analysis. But by cost, we're not just talking about money. We're talking about all of the costs of doing whatever it is that, taking any treatment that you're talking about or doing whatever procedure you're talking about. So most people don't consider all of the potential costs and therefore all of the potential risks that come with any particular intervention. So first of all, whenever you do something, there's an opportunity cost to doing that thing. That opportunity cost is not just the money you're spending on the product or the service, but it's also the time that you're spending doing it. It is the time and effort you spent researching it and thinking about it and finding a practitioner or finding the product that you want to use. It also diverts your time and attention and resources away from other interventions that may have a better risk versus benefit ratio. There's also financial harm. Sometimes this is minimal. Again, everything is risk versus benefit or cost versus benefit, but sometimes those costs are substantial. Sometimes they may not seem like a lot up front, but they add up. If it's something that you're going to be doing for a long time, there's many sessions required, or it's a daily supplement or whatever, you have to consider the costs added up over the long period of time. And it may not just be one intervention. There may be multiple things that you're doing, all of which may have a moderate cost, but added together could be substantial. And that could be taking away resources from more effective things that you could be doing. There's also psychological harm. Often this is neglected or ignored. People will invest emotion in a potential treatment as well. And then when that potential treatment doesn't work or doesn't turn out the way they hope, then that can cause not only disappointment, sometimes even depression, again, further detracting from sometimes what you're looking for in the first place, which is to improve your quality of life. Your quality of life may, in fact, be harmed by the fact that you realize you wasted some time, money, and effort on something that ultimately was of no value. And then the hardest thing to really wrap your head around are the potential downstream harms. So, for example, if you engage with a treatment that seems relatively harmless in terms of immediate causes of harm up front, for some low-risk, self-limiting, symptomatic treatment, and you are convinced that maybe it helped a little, then that will prepare you or your loved ones or whoever for relying upon these treatments which do not work for more serious illness. Hey, my cold was a little bit better when I did acupuncture. Therefore, now that I have cancer, I'm going to go to the acupuncturist. So this actually happens. And so you're in, the relying upon treatments that have, no possibility of working, for example, like homeopathy, something that's based on magical thinking. And then placebo effects come into play, regression to the mean. There's a lot of things that could convince you that a treatment worked when in fact it didn't. And this just feeds into this belief in treatments which are unscientific and nonsensical, and that causes a lot of downstream mischief. Further, where do you think all that money is going? All the money that is going into the supplements and the homeopathy and whatever are funding quacks and charlatans and the anti-vaccine movement, and all of these things is a multi-billion-dollar industry, largely funded by people saying, what's the harm? Why not? It couldn't hurt. And then spending moderate amounts of money on things that are worthless or not very plausible to begin with. Those millions, billions of dollars get fed into an industry of quackery. And so that is perhaps the biggest downstream harm. And then that industry has increasing influence on state and federal laws. And then we get increasingly unscientific or non-science-based medicine-friendly laws being passed at the state and federal level, which makes it even easier to practice quackery. And then practitioners who are not steeped in science, who are not based on science, get more and more political clout until they get legitimized and they get licensed, and the whole thing snowballs. I know that may seem like a really big outcome because you decided to buy some supplement, which may or may not work, but every one of those little decisions adds up to collectively the decisions that we're making as a society. And now here we are, in 2020, we have laws that are extremely friendly to unscientific medicine. There's the industry is just overwhelmed with fraudulent and dubious products. Magical potions are being sold as medicine. And that we didn't arrive here all at once. We arrived here because millions of people made that decision that, what's the harm? I'll try this thing that looks harmless. It can't hurt. Well, it is hurting. So all of these things have to be considered when you're making these individual decisions. Now, having said all of that, I always like to just to balance out these kinds of talks with the kernel of legitimacy. And they're usually almost in everything. I mean, nothing is 100% black and white, right? So often there's a kernel of legitimacy to anything. So sometimes even physicians will say, let's try this, it couldn't hurt. And what we really mean is that let's do something that you should be doing anyway, that we know from the evidence there's a net benefit to, and maybe it'll help this other problem that you're interested in. So we look for the win-wins. So for example, if you're low in some vitamin level, and we know we need to supplement that vitamin anyway, and it may or may not be causing your fatigue or whatever other symptom that you have, but we'll say, well, let's do it. It can't hurt, meaning you need to do this anyway. We know independently that this is a good thing. Maybe it will or maybe it won't help this other symptom that you're having. That's a very different situation than using an unknown treatment or something which probably doesn't work, or worst case scenario is a magical potion. So don't confuse those two things. Doing something which is a win-win, you should be doing it anyway, versus buying into pseudoscientific treatments. Okay, I hope this was helpful. If you like these videos, then like it on Facebook and YouTube and all the social media, and let me know what kind of topics you want me to cover. You can send them to info@theskepticsguy.org. I'll take a look at that, and hopefully I'll be able to produce more of these.